listen to our dad on the Jim Cressman podcast.
With me on the podcast today, Meghan Patrick, multiple Canadian Country Music Association Award winner, Juno winner. And Meghan, other than throwing around weights and choking people or trying to not get choked in the jiu-jitsu dojo, one of my favorite things to do is to sit around and read poetry. I find it very inspiring, and I came across this poem that reminds me a lot of you. It's called Girls of the Wild, written by Nikita Gill. And when I'm finished, I want you to tell me how it resonates with you.
Okay.
They won't tell you a fairy tale of how girls can be dangerous and still win. They will only tell you stories where girls are sweet, kind, and reject all sin. I guess to them, it's a terrifying thought, a Red Riding Hood who knew exactly what she was doing when she invited the wild in.
That's cool. I dig that. What was her name? Nikita Gill?
Nikita Gill. Yeah.
I'm gonna write
She's
that
got a
down.
lot of great work out there, but that one reminded me a lot of you and sort of the energy that you take into your art, into your live performance, and into your brand.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny when you were reading that, the first thing that came to mind is, when I go in to write songs, and I've kind of gotten this reputation as sort of the tough girl, tomboy. Everybody knows I like to hunt. I'm very outspoken. I've got the tattoos and whatever, and so I find a lot of people want to write like tough girl songs with me. And to me, there's a difference between writing a song in which the female character is tough. There's a difference between writing that song and writing the song where you're talking about how tough you are. People that are tough don't have to talk about how tough they are. Do you know what I mean? And so people want to write those types of songs with me, and I'm like, that just seems like put on and like cheesy and like eye rolly to me. And I felt like that poem reminded me of the approach that I want to take when I write those kind of songs, which is like it's kind of you just it's just implied in your actions and your words without actually saying it. And and I think that's the most impactful way to come across as like a strong woman, is not to just give all these examples of how tough you are, but just to write the song from the perspective of a woman who is tough, and where it just comes through in the writing.
I love what you said there too about the implication versus spelling it out.
Yes.
Because I think when you spell it out, you run the risk of not only being inauthentic, but being typecast in a certain role. I think we saw that with Gretchen Wilson at one point where, after Redneck Woman, which was a great song and was her at the time, it was like she became like a female Sylvester Stallone. It was like she couldn't play any other character and get taken seriously. And you've been able to still be yourself, align with the things that are important to you, but make sure you don't end up in a position where you're not allowed to be vulnerable.
Well, and it's tough, because I felt I was always worried about that, of being typecast based on anything I put out, especially some of my earlier stuff, because that's the first impression you make, and some of the songs that I've put out that didn't they weren't my best charting songs. They weren't the award-winning songs, but they were important for me to release in terms of people understanding me as a whole person and not just a caricature of a person. Like for example, I mean, still to this day, one of my favorite songs I've ever put out was "The Bad Guy." And that was a very vulnerable song for me. It was even the production was different from what I'd done previously. But that song was so real to me, and it's I think to this day is still my highest streamed song of all time. It was one of my poorest performing songs at radio, but I still get messages about that song, and it's one of those songs. I mean, it's a ballad, and when I play it live, and you've got everyone from the group of five girls singing at the top of their lungs to the dude in the cut off shirt and the muscles and the tattoos singing every word. It was such a relatable song to so many people. And again, it wasn't commercially my most successful song, but it was important. It was an important part of my story and my development as an artist, and for people and for my fans to see that change and that shift from, Grace and Grit or Bow Chicka Wow Wow, and again, it's like it was one of the first. It was a bit of a risk, I guess, for me to take, but I needed to take it because when I first got started, you know, and I'll say this, like I'm not proud of anything I've ever put out, but I've grown and evolved a lot since I signed my record deal. And when I did first sign my record deal, I was really green and I was just so excited to finally have an opportunity that I think it's fair to say that I probably was a little bit more amenable to doing things that I wasn't 100% sure of, but I wanted the opportunity, and I wanted the support of my label and I wanted the support of radio. And I just wanted to get to that place where I could break through enough to where I could maybe pull back a little bit more of that control and have a little bit more say in what I was releasing. So to me, it was always sort of strategic. And again, it was never like not authentic, it was just different shades of me and different evolutions of me and everything. So, I
Well, you're
think,
taking a risk because you are deviating from what made you famous. Now, I've often
yeah,
said you can be unidimensionally famous, but you can't have unidimensional legacy, right? If
mhm,
you're going to go down as one of the greats, people need to see all sides, and this is true no matter what. If you're talking artists, movie stars, literature, people need to see different dynamics of
yeah,
what's at play. And a lot of the times you're right. The stuff you take a risk on isn't going to be your most commercially successful
yeah. But it was
music.
important.
Right. But it has to come out there because people
Yeah.
have to understand that there's more to you than just, hunting, fishing, and kicking ass,
Yeah.
which are important things
Oh,
too. But
yeah,
it's
for
important
sure.
to give people that perspective. So I want to bounce back to a point you just made,
Mhm.
which is sometimes there's this deviation in our industry between songs that translate really well with fans. Um, I think you cited a great example of The Bad Guy, which streamed really well. It's one of your
Mhm.
highest streaming songs to date, but it
Yeah.
didn't chart that high on radio. Most of the time, those things are aligned. Usually, a high streaming song does well on radio, but we do have these anomalies in our business where there's a big disconnect between what radio thinks is good for their audience and what
Yep.
the audience believes is good for them. Why
Yeah.
do you think that is?
Jim, if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be more successful. The radio game is always a little bit of a mystery, and I mean, I try not to get too hung up on it. And I have to say, like, I'm trying. I don't want to get too off topic here, but like, just with the pandemic and everything, I obsessed way more over radio in the last year than I normally would because it was all I had. You know me. I mean, the way I met you was you put me on some shows. That was how we got to know each other, was the live aspect of things. And you know how much I love that, and how much of a big, like, that's the biggest part of my career. It's my biggest focus, is to be a great performer above everything else. And when that got taken away from me, it was a lot harder to not really fixate on chart position and radio. And the last two singles that I put out to radio, like during the pandemic, are my poorest performing singles ever at radio. And it was really tough because I felt really stuck. Like, I mean, I'm here in the US, so it's like I can't go out and visit these people, which I couldn't really anyway, even if I was in Canada. And it was like I felt like I was doing everything I could to promote these songs. I was doing live streams, I was doing, phone interviews, Zooms, like everything under the sun, and it just wasn't happening. And the first of those two that went out that didn't perform was Things I Shouldn't Say. Now, speaking of songs that were a risk, but I wanted to put out anyway, that was one of those songs because it was a song where a woman was talking about and embracing her sexuality. And if you listen to the lyrics, there is not one thing in that song that is any more racy, than Luke Bryan's Strip It Down, or Eric Church Love You Like a Wrecking Ball, or any of these songs, or Jason Aldean. Like, it's all of these men had put these songs out to radio that are charting and doing well, and then a woman does it and no dice. And I think it really bothered me, and I don't know if that,
Do you
maybe
think
that's
that's
what.
proprietary to the country format? Like, again, we'll back up a little bit on
Yeah.
this, but women put out very sexually independent and expressive songs in pop music all the
Yep.
time and in rock music.
Mhm.
Doesn't seem to affect him. And in fact,
Yep. Probably worse.
WAP was a massive hit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, do you think it's
Well,
proprietary somewhat to the country format that they expect a certain type of behavior from female artists?
I mean, I don't see how that could not be a reality. I mean, it doesn't there's nothing else that makes sense to me. I mean, I was already a fairly established artist who's had a number one at radio and a handful of top tens, top five, award winning. It's not like I was a new artist. I had a fan base. I was established. I've historically done pretty well at radio for the most part. And it really bothered me because I felt like some of the stations that wouldn't play it wouldn't say why. It was, oh, it's tempo or that or this or that, and I felt like it was because of the content. And it bothered me that, while in so many other realms of the industry people are talking about, women in
Hashtag girl
country.
power.
Yeah, and I was like, "But I'm not allowed to do this." Like, put your money where your mouth is, and that's and I didn't, and again, there's no way of me ever really knowing why it didn't work. I also understand it was in a pandemic, and which was a tough time in general for everybody, but I have to believe that, like, part of it was because of the content. And it bothered me, but I also knew it was a risk when I did it, and I'm proud of myself for doing it because I know it resonated with fans, and I know that they needed for me to put out that song and to say something about it and address it, whether it worked out for me professionally in terms of the chart position, which it didn't. I made a point, and I stood up for women, and I said, "I don't care if you don't like this, because I'm gonna. If the guys can do it, why can't I do it? I mean, that's the story of my life. If guys can do it, why can't I do it? You know." And so it's interesting that you brought up, women in pop or rock music or whatever, and that was because, I mean, this conversation about women in country music has been at the forefront of things for years now. Like, this is not a topic that requires awareness anymore. We're all aware of the discrepancy with women at radio, on lineups at festivals, touring, all that kind of stuff. And so, I've spent a lot of time thinking about why that is. And I don't believe that it's just because the industry is full of misogynists who don't like women. And one of the things that I always felt was maybe part of it was that I have this whole theory, and I don't know if there's any merit to it, but I have this theory. I think, when you look back in like the 90s, women like owned country music. You had Shania and Reba and Trisha and all these like absolute powerhouse artists. And I feel like what happened was, as some of those women, whether it was they kind of aged out of it, or they had families, or they kind of pulled back on touring and releases for whatever reason, as they kind of like pulled back from this stardom, what came forward to me next, the next big thing was like bro country. It was like Florida Georgia Line and that whole like movement. And and on the one hand, I think it was positive for country music because I think that it brought in a younger audience that wasn't there, and it kind of like revived country. And I know there was a lot of people that hated it because they're like, well, this isn't real country. And I mean, to be honest, I was one of those people at first. I loved my traditional country, but in the end, like, you couldn't deny that it was bringing in a whole new audience, and that people were liking it. And it wasn't my style of country music, but it was well done for the most part. It was well produced, well written songs, and it was a vibe. It was a thing, and everybody jumped on it. The fans, radio, like, it just became the new big thing. And I just feel like, by nature of what row country is, it just didn't leave. There wasn't really a space for most women to fit into that genre. There are a couple women that did it. I mean, the most prominent one would be Kelsey Ballerini. She came out, and I would say she was the closest thing to like a female version of bro country. She was really young, the style of her production and her music, and it worked for her, and she crushed it. I mean, she came out of the gate with like three number ones in a row as like a new young female artist, which, whether or not her music is my cup of tea, that's badass. Like, I love that for her. And I think what happened a little bit is that, the bro country thing was everything. And I think a lot of women tried to find their place in it, and it didn't work because it wasn't authentic to them. They were chasing something that wasn't them. And then when that didn't work, I think a lot of female artists, I think the artistry suffered a little bit because they were trying to find a way into this new thing and there wasn't a thing for them. And so they started getting safe and started chasing things that weren't who they were. And the authenticity went out the window. And this is not a dig on any like specific woman or anything. It's just like my view from the outside. And when you get safe and you chase things that aren't authentic to you, the audience is going to see through it, especially country fans. I think they're smart fans. I think they see through things that aren't real. And so I think just the quality of music women were putting out suffered a little bit. And I don't blame them. There just wasn't, everybody wanted bro country and it just didn't lend itself to female artists for the most part. So it was just a tough spot for females. And it's not that women, it's not that people don't want to hear female artists. It's not that women aren't as good. It was just that was the big thing and it was bro country, you know? It's that bro is literally in the name of it. So I think that, you know, the best thing that we can do as women is just work hard and write great songs that are undeniable and chase only what is authentic to us, not what is working and what's trending for the guy artists, and try and figure out how to fit into their world. Make your own world and make it undeniable, and make your fan base, cuz it's not like, I mean, like you said, like I said earlier, historically female artists have run country music before and they can and will again when the music is there and when it's authentic and when it's great and undeniable, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more in the premise that you gotta chase what's undeniable. How have you resisted the temptation to chase trends, to chase radio safe songs
Mhm.
as opposed to material that really resonates with you? I mean, one of the things I've always admired about you is you know who you are and
Mhm.
you've stayed true to that.
Yeah.
But it's got to be difficult to stay on that path. I mean, you just talked about it a few minutes ago. You're putting out
Mhm.
music now that you feel is more who you are than ever before. It's
Mhm.
not translating at radio. There's got to be the temptation sometimes to go, all right, fuck it, let's chase something that's safe.
Nah. I mean, I mean, honestly, part of it is a little bit just my age. I mean, when I first signed my record deal, I think I was 27, almost 28. So I was a good few years older than most of the other women that were prominent in country music at the time, at least in Canada. And, you know, I used to always think like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so behind, like I'm so much older than everybody and I wish I signed my deal so much earlier." And especially, you know, in a genre where you have like, you know, Taylor Swift who got famous so young, and a lot of other women were that way. But I realized that I'm glad I didn't sign a record deal when I was 22 because I didn't know who I was, and a lot of 22-year-olds don't. And by the time I signed my deal, you know, I did know who I was, and more importantly who I wasn't. And you know, I just, of course I want success at radio, but most importantly, I want to be remembered as like iconic, as legendary. I want my music to have longevity. I want people to care about my songs beyond 6 months to a year at radio. I want to create lasting fans. And the thing about lasting fans is that you have to create your own thing and build it with them. When you chase something that's working for someone else, you might get a few fair weather fans, you might get a few people for that one song, but they're not buying you, they're just buying the song. I want fans that buy me and my whole brand, my personality, everything I do, and that are going to buy all my records till the day I die or they die, you know? And I feel like that is more important and is going to garner more success in the long run. And I'm always looking at the bigger picture. You know, quick, nobody wants a band-aid on a bullet hole. Nobody wants a quick fix. I don't, because I want to be doing this until I'm literally too old to stand and can't do it anymore. And so bigger picture means staying the course, staying true to myself, and continuing to spend all of my energy figuring out who I am and how to best, you know, channel that into my music. Because again, people, I mean, you look at Luke Combs. The reason why Luke Combs is so massive is because that's who he is. I mean, people don't just buy his songs, they buy his brand, his personality, his lifestyle. And you know, he stayed the course. Every major in town said no to him until Lynn said, "I see something here." And he stayed exactly who he was. He didn't, you know, go and get jacked and tanned and wear skinny jeans like every other, country artist. He stayed himself and wore his Crocs and his Columbia shirts, and he's a bigger dude and he's got a beard, and he just gets up there and sings his ass off. And he's a genuine person. So that's why he is as big as he is, because people bought the whole brand and he stayed the course and knew that what he had was authentic and real, and he had to just keep chasing that until people caught on.
I think the industry has a nasty habit of underestimating the intelligence of the consumer or thinking that they're more superficial than they are.
Yep.
And where that has spoken to me outside of music is podcasts. People will tune in and listen to a podcast for 2 or 3 hours. They don't necessarily want to be subjected to the 15-second soundbite they're getting from mainstream media.
Yep.
People will watch a series with 9 seasons, like The Sopranos, or Breaking Bad, or people will tune in for these essentially what become 50-hour movies,
Hmm.
right? With all of these different plot lines and characters that come and go. People are more complex and have a desire to connect with something that's complex
Absolutely.
and weave it into their own lives in a manner that they see fit,
Hmm.
right? And
Yep.
I think the industry does have a bad habit sometimes of going, well, this is what's hot right now, and you got to put on these jeans and you got to look this way, and that's how it's got to be. And again, kind
Couldn't
of
agree
back
more.
to this idea of when you got signed early in your career to Warner, you were very honest with them about the type of package you wanted to put forward. I remember you and I had a drink in Toronto, and you talked about how, like, listen, I just don't want to be another good looking blonde 20 something girl who wears a dress and puts
Mhm,
out a record that's
mhm.
radio friendly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's what, and I've been really, really lucky and blessed with the team that I've been able to work with, and my team at Warner. I remember my first meeting with Steve Kane and Ron, and I went in and I played a couple songs for them, and we hung out. I mean, I loved Steve immediately because Steve is a music lover, and also clearly a great businessman. He runs a massive major label, but I always felt that he really does put the music and the artistry first, and he really cares about his artists. And I think I maybe even took him and Ron a little off guard when because they said, what are your goals? What do you see for yourself? And I basically said, I'm like, look, I am in this for the long haul. I want to create a career that has longevity. And I know that right now, a lot of what's working at country radio is very pop, especially, on the female side of things. And I said, if you're seeing me and saying, well, she's a, good looking blonde girl and she can sing and we can get her to cut these songs and wear this and that'll work because that's what's working right now. I said, as much as I want a record deal, thank you, but no thank you. That's not me. That's not who I am. This is what I want to do. This is the music I envision. These are my influences. This is what I hear and what I see for myself. And if you guys are on board to, you know, do something different and really do this right and trust me and I trust you and we work as a team to do something cool and unique, then let's do it. And they did, and they stood by that for my whole career. I've never, you hear horror stories and they're real, about major labels and stuff. And I've never been forced or pushed to make music I didn't want to make, or wear things I didn't want to wear, or be someone I didn't want to be. And I've gotten a lot of backlash over the years for different things, and my labels always stood by me. For the hunting, I've gotten a lot of hate and a lot of backlash for hunting, and I've refused to back down on my love for the outdoors and conservation and hunting, and I think it's an important thing that I'm always going to advocate for. And and my
So
label
for people
even.
who don't get it, for people who don't get the affinity for hunting,
Mhm.
what's your message to those folks?
Well, the first thing I ask them is, do you eat meat? Because if you do, you don't get to judge me, not one bit, not at all. It's totally hypocritical for you to walk into a grocery store and think that you're somehow better than me because you pick up your meat in a shiny little package where you're conveniently removed from what that animal went through to get into the grocery store and onto your plate. and don't get me wrong, hunting is not for everybody, and that's okay. I'm not judging people who don't want to do it. I mean, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, and the actual act of taking a life is heavy. It's not the idea of what hunters are. It's like, a bunch of like bloodthirsty rednecks who just like killing stuff. It couldn't be further from the truth, for a real hunter. And this is the other thing too. It's not just about my own personal fulfillment. It's about conservation and the health of our wildlife. Hunters and fishermen pay more money into the conservation of our wildlife than anybody. I mean, we pay for it in our licenses, our tags. All of these things go into the science and research of our wildlife and how to best serve them, how to maintain population, be careful, be mindful of diseases and issues within the wildlife. And it does have to be maintained. People think that we've like evolved into this place where hunters and aren't needed anymore, and it's just not true. We are a part of the ecosystem and maintaining population and all the wildlife. And the reality is, what I've found is that anybody who has hated me for hunting, if they've ever been even willing to even just hear me out and let me give them some information, 99.9% of the time they go, wow, I just didn't know all that. They just didn't have the information. And once they did, they were like, okay, that kind of changes my view on things. And so that's why I never back down. And I'm always trying to put that information out. And even when I do post things about my hunts, I always try and give information. I like to show people that I eat everything I hunt, and what that whole process is. I just did a hunt in Florida, and I showed pictures and the whole process of the hunt to being in the trailer that night and cooking up the turkey. I give people recipes, all that kind of stuff. It's really, really important, for people to understand that. And in the realm of how it ties into country music, I got a lot of hate some years back because I did a black bear hunt in Manitoba with Canada and the Rough Guys, who are hands down some of the kindest, sweetest people. The Beasley brothers, they are conservationists. They're great hunters. They're good people. Black bears are actually quite overpopulated in Manitoba, and I shot it with a bow. It was a very legitimate,
It's a
very
ballsy
grueling.
move,
It was a very grueling
bow hunting
week
bear.
long hunt, all day, every
Yeah.
day. I hunted. And, when all was said and done, we cleaned the bear. I took some of the meat home. I donated the bulk of the meat to some families on the nearby reserve that were kind of falling on hard times. And I paid a lot of money to tan that hide and honor that animal. It was everything about it was ethical and respectful. And yet I just got crucified for this. And what bothered me, going back to radio, there were some radio stations that reached out to the label and said, well, we're getting complaints from listeners and blah blah blah. And I had just put a new single out, and my response was, I was like, okay, well, what are they going to pull my single? Because if they're going to pull mine, they better pull Blake Shelton's, Jason Aldean's, Luke Bryan's, Tyler Farr's. I mean, the list goes on. All of these guys, not only do they hunt, they have entire businesses and companies built around hunting where they're making money off of it. And it felt like this double standard. I'm like, all of these male, I mean, you probably we're spinning hunting, fishing, and loving every day. When Luke Bryan put it out, I mean, it was a number one song. So if you're going to play that song and the music from all these men who hunt and make money off of it, but I'm somehow the bad guy, because I did this, like, it was just very frustrating to me. But like I said, my label had my back. They stood by me. And I had some good friends in the industry, other artists and writers and stuff that stood by me, and I appreciated it. But and I have suffered for it over the years, but I refuse to back down on what I stand for, because I'm not wrong. you know I'm not a bad person. I'm not evil. I'm not like some bloodthirsty murderer. It's more than that. And it's a personal choice, and it's a lifestyle. And I don't judge other people for their lifestyles. If it's not affecting, they're not hurting me.
Yeah,
So
it's this weird social media peer pressure culture that we're all part of now. And I worry about the long-term implications of it on art,
yep.
because as much as Warner Canada and Steve Kane has had your back, he may not be there forever. And at
Yep.
some point, there might be an executive there who might be more willing to bend and bow to public pressure. And we've
Yep.
seen this with artists who,
Yep.
have had heterodox opinions on, or haven't conformed with the Church of Woke orthodoxy on some things, and next thing you know, they're getting dropped, or they're getting,
Yep.
um,
It's scary.
they're getting deprioritized at the very least. Yeah,
Oh
it is
yeah.
very scary because I think art requires and listen, I'm not saying you got to be irresponsible with your platform or with what you're saying, but
Yeah.
art requires a certain degree of creative latitude. You have to
Mhm.
be, you reserve the right to make some mistakes,
Yep.
say some things that may not be necessarily right or true,
Yep.
but find your way through that process publicly. And for artists, that's an ongoing dynamic that I certainly don't covet. I mean, it's like
No.
you are sorting through highly incendiary issues many times in the public eye, and if you
Mhm.
say or do something wrong, you are attacked for it.
It's truly terrifying. I mean, it's the last year, especially, politically, things have been very heated, very divided. We've been dealing with this pandemic where there are a lot of differing opinions, and compile that with the fact that many people have been out of work and spending a lot of time just in their homes, probably on their phone, on social media, really obsessing over these things, and nobody's had the opportunity to just kind of go out and live, and so people have become very obsessed about these things, and there is very much this morally superior attitude with a lot of people on social media. It's like, they've made it their god-given right or duty to go out and seek out anybody who disagrees with them or the popular narrative, and like ruin their lives and take their job away from them and ruin their careers. And it's very scary as like a public figure to feel like you could lose your job just by having a unpopular opinion, or having a different political belief. And I've always kind of, I've never been very vocal about my political beliefs or anything like that, because, and this is just my personal opinion, and this is nothing against any artist that does choose to use their platform, in tandem with political activism. But I feel, I created my platform and my following based off of my art and my music. Nobody followed me to hear about my political opinions or thoughts. And so to me, I think it's a little bit irresponsible for me to create that platform based on one thing and then use it to push my other opinions on my fans, because
It's a little bit bait and switch.
yes, and I think especially because of the nature of my relationship with my fans. I mean, this isn't so much for me, but like especially some really big artists, their fans are so hardcore. I mean, so in love with these artists based on one thing that it's like they will listen to and take as gospel anything and everything they say. And I want my fans to be free thinkers, critical thinkers. I want them to think for themselves, because everybody should think for themselves. And I think it's irresponsible if you are in a position as an artist where you have these really obsessive fans. And I don't think I have obsessive fans. I'm talking, on a grander scale, bigger artists than me. I think it can be a little bit dangerous and irresponsible to put that out there, knowing that they are just going like that they're just going to grab onto that, and I
Yeah,
just
I don't
it's
know
not
about
why.
that. I don't
What's
know.
that?
I mean, I think I think it depends a lot on the person. I think it depends a lot on whether or not that artist has, like, to use your words, built that following in tandem with activism from the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of my issue with it, more so than anything else, and I often counsel my clients on this. I say, listen, look at, your platform is your platform. You're an adult. If
Mhm.
I'm managing you, I will just say this: if you're going to step out on a limb and
Mhm.
comment on something that's incendiary,
Mhm.
just know you're probably going to piss off 50% of your audience, right?
Yep.
So just understand there's going to be consequences to this. And
Yep.
the other side of it is you are showing your hand, but I'm not sure to what end. I'm not positive that there are people out there who go, Meghan Patrick, Dean Brody, Dallas, they think this way on this issue, and now suddenly I'm going to think this way on this issue. Like, I'm not sure
Mhm.
people fall in line to that degree. I think
Yeah.
they do more with political figures. You
Yeah.
see, like, it's almost like a team mentality with Democrats and Republicans in the US. You must see
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, to me, I just think it's really ineffective most of the time. And
Mhm.
here's the other thing. If you are, let's assume for a second you're an anti-Trump, anti-Republican artist, which there are plenty of.
Yes.
If all you do all day is point out everything the Republicans and Trump has done wrong, but you never own the mistakes on your side, to
Mhm.
me, I just now think you're a shill.
Yeah.
Right? To me, it's like, well, there's nothing courageous, brave, or interesting about this person now.
Yeah.
And I see it on the other side too. Like when I
Yeah.
see an artist who's hardcore right wing, and it's
Yeah.
Second Amendment and free speech,
Mhm.
and yet they never take the time to be self aware enough to go. I
Yep.
listened to this press conference and I heard what Trump said, and I thought he was really irresponsible, or he was a real asshole. Like
Yep.
they don't. To me, then it's like, okay, well then fuck, I can't trust you. You're a shill. And I
Yes.
see it with industry people all the time. It's like, like, I don't even need to talk to you to know what your perspective is going to be on
Right.
this issue.
Right.
So to me, if I am going to glean some semblance of knowledge from
Mhm.
a base, I want a bit of an indication that individual has some level of impartiality.
Yes.
Myself,
I
I don't
no,
know
I
how
agree
everyone
with
else
well,
feels.
and I think just to kind of round off that point, I'll say two things. One, I've already sort of taken on this sort of responsibility, like I was talking about with hunting and talking about conservation. And the reason why I feel comfortable stepping out on that issue and not backing down from it and making it a part of my brand, so to speak, is because I have done the research extensively. I know a lot about it, and I still have so much more to know, but I know enough about it that I feel comfortable that I'm able to give impartial, true, factual information about what I do as a hunter and conservationist. Now, when it comes to politics and things like that, I mean, I of course educate myself the best I can when it comes time to vote and deal with certain issues, but I don't know everything about it. I don't watch the news all day every day and follow every single thing that's said and done. And so I don't feel comfortable, putting my thoughts out on something without knowing that I probably haven't done the full scope of research. And that's to
How
me where
responsible of you.
well, that was to me more what I was trying to get at with the irresponsibility factor is that I see artists sometimes making statements like very bold statements about certain things and I'm like, well, that's not all the facts. And some of them are opinions and not facts, but they're opinions stated as facts, things like that. And I just think it gets really murky and also to be perfectly honest, I can only take so much hate in my day. And I already take it a lot for hunting and things like that. And so I'm not really in a position where I think I want to take on any other possible hate. And again, the most important thing for me with my platform is keeping it so that I can continue to make music. Because at the end of the day, I don't need or want my fans to think like me. I just want them to like my music. I want everybody to come to my shows. I want everybody to buy my records, and I want them to buy it simply on the merit of the music and not based on political or social or whatever beliefs. And again, that's not a dig on the artists that choose to do that. But if that's what you do, good for you. Just be responsible about it. Make sure
Yeah.
you have your facts,
Well, and
and
that's why it's so important to research the counter argument to the thing that you believe in the most, right?
right.
Like, um, we just spent time here talking about how the social justice movement is dangerous, but honestly, I think the net effect of social justice has actually been a positive for society in that it's moved ahead and evolved our way of thinking and understanding and empathizing with
Yeah.
um, uh, people who are minorities in society, or people who
Yes.
have been ostracized due to their sexuality. Like, I think the
Hmm.
net effect of political correctness has been really positive,
Yeah.
but when it becomes weaponized to
Yes.
acquire social justice currency, it it then becomes a search to trick people or shame people and creating villains where there aren't any.
Yes.
And
I
that's
couldn't
where I
agree
think
more.
it becomes dangerous and we're all turning on each other when that
Mhm.
happens. And that's the heartbreaking aspect of it. Because I go, listen, if we're talking about hunting down white nationalists and we're talking about, Edward Norton's character in American History X before he finally redeems himself,
Yeah.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
The guy with the swastika
Do it.
tattoo on his chest, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we're talking about, somebody who wants to use the hashtag all lives matter because to them, uh, they do, and that's their
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah.
That is not the same thing as a Nazi to me. So
No.
we got to be really careful with these definitions and
Mhm.
not just
I
search
agree.
people out for the sake of attacking them.
Yes.
But
And that's the thing is like there's a lot of that language being thrown around very casually. And I think it's pretty offensive to use the word Nazi casually because it really downplays the effect of what an actual Nazi is and what that meant to Jewish people and what's happened in
right,
history, and I've noticed that a lot with social media and stuff. People that are angry and they really want to make a point, and so they grab these very very impactful words and use them as a part of their narrative, and it's not the correct use of that word, and it's what's the word, it's just it doesn't help the cause because it inflames the people that you're maybe trying to get their attention, the people you're trying to have a conversation with, or the people that you're trying to change their mind. you know it's not helpful to the conversation.
no,
It's
you're not going to
sort of
persuade anyone by calling them a Nazi to see
no,
your side of
it's
the argument, right?
right.
And it's quixotic too. I mean, if you're familiar with the old tale of Don Quixote who
Hmm.
uh, ends up fighting with his sword and his armor. He's fighting windmills because he believes them to be dragons, and like that's what we've done with this movement at times. It's like we are fighting people who are already on our side. We
Yeah.
just disagree on a few of the
Yeah.
nuances,
Yeah.
right? So that I'm never going to be down with. I'm a big
Yeah.
believer in unity, build as big a tent as possible,
Hmm.
challenge people on corrupted belief structures, but do
Yeah.
it from a place of love where
Yeah.
you want them to
Yeah.
exemplify the best traits of who they could be potentially in society if they abandon some bad ideas. You
Yeah.
want to help them. You
Yeah.
don't want to just beat them up for the
Right.
sake of showing everybody else that you're a good person and they're not, because
That the end
that's a
goal
zero sum
is,
game.
yeah, the end goal is to educate the people that are ignorant. Not everybody that is said or done racist things is a bad person. Some of them were raised differently. They're not aware. So the best way to make them aware, that's not an excuse, but I'm saying the best way to make them aware is to approach with love and try and find an understanding and have that conversation so that they can do better instead of, like you said, just beating them into the ground to show everybody, hey, look what I did, I got this person and they said something they shouldn't have said, and so now we're gonna destroy them. And that doesn't help bring them into the fold of learning love and unity and trying to move forward together to be better as people. And in the end, that's what we all want. It's what we all should want.
I couldn't agree more. Now you had a viral incident with a fan at a festival. Um, Actually, why don't you just describe it a little bit? Because I think what happens with these things is you get games of broken telephone
Hmm.
where somebody describes the incident and then um, everybody sort of builds their own narrative off of that rather than understanding exactly what happened from your perspective. So go ahead and give us a synopsis on that.
um well, I guess first I'll ask, how can I say the F word?
Of
Because there's a
course,
lot of them.
of course, yes.
Well, so yeah, so we were playing a show in Hagersville, and it's one of the first headlining slots I've had at a festival. So I was really excited about this show, and unfortunately, things were kind of running behind with the festival, and there were a few things that happened. So I was a little bit frustrated, even before we went on stage because we were playing much later than we were supposed to, and at a festival where people show up and start drinking at 1 or 2 in the hot sun all day, when it's like 11 o'clock, by the time, you're losing some of your audience that you rightfully should have had as a headliner. And so I think I was already a little bit on edge because of that. And we get out there, though, we start playing, everything's great, the crowd is great. And I was starting to introduce a song, and I thought I heard a guy say, "Show me your tits." And so I kind of just ignored it, kept talking, and then he yelled it again, even louder. And I was like, "Okay, you want attention? Here it is." And so, I think I just said, I just said, I'm like, "Who said that?" I said, "Turn the lights on. I want to know who said that." And it was like crickets at first, and then they kind of flipped the lights out on the audience, and a bunch of people were pointing at this guy. Like, they just totally threw him under the bus.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
said,
fair enough.
"Yeah." And I looked at him, I said, "You?" And I don't even know what he said. I said, "Get the fuck out." And he starts yelling back at me, and I said, "No, get the fuck out." And I honestly, Jim, I was so angry because, one, like I said, I was a little on edge about the way things had gone earlier in the day. And on top of that, it's not even the fifth or 10th time some guy has said something like that to me while I've been on stage. And many, many times before, I've ignored it. Many times before, I've made a lighthearted joke and just moved on. And I don't know, for some reason, I think it was the fact that he didn't just say it once. He wanted me to hear him say it, and he
Yeah.
was obnoxiously trying to interrupt my show to make a scene and say it. And I just went off. I can't remember exactly what I said. It was something I said, something about, I didn't spend my whole life, working and being broke, and it's sad, to have to get up here and have some drunk dipshit, degrade what I do to show me your tits. And I think I said, "I work too hard, motherfucker. Fuck you." And so he was escorted out. And I mean, the audience was great. I mean, they were cheering for me. They seemed supportive of it, because not only was it offensive to me, it was offensive to the people that were there to enjoy the show. And I had to stop the show to address this guy because he wouldn't stop screaming, "Show me your tits." And
It's I always wonder when you encounter guys like that, what kind of a relationship they have with their mom or their sisters, right? Because
yeah,
most of those guys, if you pulled them aside and said, "Hey, motherfucker, what if I was saying that to your sister? What
right,
would you do? What if I screamed that at your mom?
yeah,
Like, you would punch me in the fucking face." So, like, think about that next time
yeah,
when you go to a show like this, and understand that that individual up there who's on stage, in this case you, is not just someone who's worked her ass off to get
right,
where she is,
hmm,
but she's also somebody's sister and she's somebody's
right.
daughter, and Jesus
Well,
Christ, like, have a little respect.
and even beyond that, the fallout, so to speak, of that whole scenario. I mean, first of all, I will say, within the industry, the support was overwhelmingly positive. Like, really, really wonderful, from fellow artists, just other people in the industry, across the board. I got messages from a lot of women. I remember, like, Jess Moskluke sent me a message, and she's so sweet. And she was like, honestly, she's like, "I've had it happen to me before too, and I never said anything." And it always kind of bugged me that I didn't say anything, but I kind of felt like I shouldn't, or I couldn't. And now you kind of inspired me to say something the next time. And that's what I love to hear. And I had men reach out that said, "I have daughters." And I showed them the video, and I said, "Look, this isn't language you should use, but the premise behind what she said is real, and you should never feel like you have to accept that kind of behavior from men." And this is the thing that bothered me the most from the people that weren't supportive, was all of the people saying, um "This is part of your job. Get over it. Get over yourself. You signed up for this." And I said, "No, the fuck I didn't. I'm not a stripper." I said that in my rant. I said, "This isn't a strip club. I'm not a stripper." Like, I did not sign up for this. This is my job. We'll call this stage my office. If I were in a boardroom making a presentation at a business, a place of business, and some guy yelled, "Show me your tits," from the down the table, would that be acceptable? No. So why is it acceptable here for me? It's like, and like, yeah, granted, it's not like the end of the world or anything. The guy probably was just drunk and thought it would be funny, but it's not funny. It's just
It's
not.
objectification.
Yeah, it's objectifying, and it's it's frustrating to me as someone who has literally dedicated their entire life to writing songs and being a great performer and putting on a good show, to have what I do and all of the blood, sweat, and tears to be degraded and downplayed to show me your tits, and
If that had been a one-on-one exchange and you hadn't been on stage and there hadn't been an audience, how do you think that conversation would have went?
the exact same. I mean, you know, I I mean, I don't know. I suppose if it had happened in a one-on-one situation, I probably would have just looked at him and said, "Are you fucking serious? Like, why would you say that?" You know? And maybe it would have been a bit more of a calmer, like interactive situation. I mean, maybe I could have had a conversation with him, but
Well,
when
your adrenaline's jacked. He's being
yeah,
an asshole. I mean, you're on
yes.
stage. He's interrupting your show.
Yes.
Like, you're human. By the
Yeah.
way, I get it. I totally understand where you were coming from, and I don't think you should have faced any fire for that because
Oh,
we would have all
um,
done the same thing had that been, a
Jim,
female that we care about, right?
if you saw some of the comments I got, it would make your stomach turn. I mean, it was the like I said, within the industry even in the media, I did a couple interviews about it with some radio stations and some media outlets, and they were all very supportive, and I commented on the language too. I mean, first of all, there were some people saying like there could have been children there. I was like, it was almost midnight. So, if you have small children out at a show at midnight, they're gonna see and hear some adult things. That's just comes. I mean,
Right.
my mom took me to concerts when I was young, and it was understood. If I saw or heard something that was inappropriate, then it was my mother's responsibility to have that conversation with me, and talk it out with me. It's not my responsibility, like, to raise your children or whatever. I mean, this is not. I'm not a children's act. I'm a grown adult who mostly plays in bars and clubs to 21 plus crowds, and I'm aware that I have young.
Well, and let's not pretend kids don't hear swear words,
Right. Well, and
in
this is what I
other
said to those
capacities,
people. I
right?
said, if let me tell you this, the way the internet and everything is now, let's say you've got a 13-year-old daughter who goes on Instagram. If if me saying that, if that's the most offensive thing your daughter saw today, then congratulations, because you know what's a
Yes.
lot more damaging and offensive than a girl standing up for herself but using some colorful language, is going on Instagram and seeing photoshopped, you know, women in bikinis and selling tea to make you shit yourself so you can be skinny, and makeup and all these products that, you know, and pictures that are not attainable, that are not what women really look like, and little girls thinking that that's how they're supposed to look. That is a lot more offensive and damaging than me saying, no, I'm not going to stand for this man verbally abusing me while I'm on stage. And I told them, I said, look, I'm sorry for the language. Had I been given the opportunity to sit down and create a more eloquent speech, I would have, but I wasn't afforded that opportunity. I reacted in the moment, and I said what I was thinking the way I was thinking it, to a mostly adult crowd. And
Well,
again,
and you know what? It was an injunction that will make him fucking think twice about doing it again, and that's
yeah,
that sometimes that's what people need. Like I often say when I encounter people who have bad manners, let's just put it under that blanket
mhm,
category. I will often say to people, especially if I'm in a position where I have to reprimand them, I wish your parents would have taught you this, right?
yeah,
But because they didn't,
yeah,
here we are adults now, and I have to say something to you,
hmm,
and I have to back that with the potential that there might be a physical altercation here, which I'd
right,
rather not do, but like that is the problem. People need to be, again, like if we're all on our journey to being our best selves, some of that means some of that corrective action is not going to come in a form that's easily palpable, right? Some of
yeah,
it's going to be a bit of a punch in the face, even if it's
yeah,
metaphorical, right?
Well,
or
and this is also my thought too. I'm like, we're not so you're offended by what I said, but not what he said? What? Like,
yeah.
seriously? You think the problem is that I said fuck a few times, not that a man like verbally harassed a woman on stage? I mean, when in the past when men have done similar things and gone on similar rants, Tim McGraw, other male artists, when somebody has done something inappropriate to a woman in the audience and a man has stood up for her and said something, you applaud him and what a great guy, what a gentleman. But when a woman does it for herself, that's not acceptable to you because you don't like that I said fuck. Get over
But to be
yourself.
fair to yourself, Megan, to be fair to yourself, and you should be fair to yourself, do you think you put too much weight on the negative comments versus all the positivity you got out of this?
Um, I, I, for the most part, I didn't. But the problem was that, so
Because
somebody
there's
that had
always
been
going to be idiots, you know, like
right.
when
Um,
people say this is what you do, I think that's what they mean is when you become a public figure, there's a small percentage of the population that are, you know, maybe not irredeemable in the long term, but they're fucking morons, and those people are going to write shit on your Instagram page or post a comment that is going to be so far out in left field. But because of the way we're wired, especially because of the way artists are wired, we weight those negative comments so much heavier than all the love we get.
right. And to me, it wasn't. It, as a whole, I don't think that I did. What happened for me with a lot of those negative comments was, it wasn't actually on my own page. It was somebody that had been at the festival, had posted the video like in support of me. This was a fan, and it was the comments that came from that because it got shared and kind of blew up on Facebook. And you know it was like, I don't even know if you want me to say some of the things that people said, but it was very disturbing. Like, just people saying like, you should be glad that that's all he said to you, and you look and sound like a dumb whore and you got what you deserved. You can't sing, you're ugly, you're fat, you need to get over yourself. He only asked to see your tits because he couldn't stand to listen to your shitty music. Like, it was really, really, really mean. And I'm telling you, like, the tame stuff. If I sent you, and it was like, this got sent to me because it was sent to someone on my management team and they said, should we try and have this taken down? And I mean, in that moment, it was a lot. It made me feel sick to my stomach. It made me really upset and really anxious. And I think a big part of it was just, it was mostly just a rude awakening of like, wow, there's this many people in the world that think this is acceptable. There's this many people in the world that think this it's okay to talk to women like that and think that their point of view is actually valid. And to say all those things to me was a valid reaction to what I did. And that was the most upsetting part of it. And again, it part of my job is that it's dealing with that. And some days I'm better at it than others. Some days I let it roll off my shoulders, I delete the comment, and I don't give it another thought. And some days it really bugs me because I'm a human being. And
Yeah.
they catch me in a place where I'm just a little extra sensitive or something. But it is
It's
tough
more than
though.
understandable. I mean, I think how you handled it was commendable. I mean, it's tough in those situations to, especially looking back in hindsight being 2020. Uh, it's like, what would I have done differently? Well, probably nothing. And you know what? To be fair, that guy probably needed, like I say, some sort of harsh injunction so that he understands that that behavior
Oh,
isn't
well,
acceptable, and he's not going to do that next time he's at a show.
I actually received a message from somebody that used to date him, actually, after that happened. And the message was more or less, thank you. He needed to hear that. Like, he's an
Good.
asshole, and there were a few guys that were at that show too that were in the audience that also sent me messages and in support of me and said, he's just an asshole, and good for you. We support you. We love you. And so, in the end, as much as some of those comments, it was just mostly shocking. Like, I couldn't the language, and it was just like, what? Like, this is very disturbing, and it kind of caught me off guard. But I remember talking to my dad about it, and he said, "Well, look, you got to look at the essentially the caliber of people that are supporting you and the caliber of people that are saying these things.
Yes.
Who
Good
whose
advice, Dad.
whose opinion matters more to you? Who are the people that you want to impress and that you want to be on your side? It's not these people. It's these people. The people that reached out and supported you, that had your back. And that was some of the best advice I could have ever gotten. So, thanks, Dad."
That is good advice, and it doesn't surprise me that your dad said that because I can tell you were raised well. So, we've been at this for over an hour, but what's next for you?
Well, new music. I'll say one of the silver linings of the pandemic for me was, I've never had this much time to focus on the creative songwriting side of things. And when the pandemic hit, that was sort of it was immediate for me. I was like, okay, I'm going to use this time to write the best songs I've ever written and really, really dig in on that side of things. And I think it was also the fact that it coincided with a lot of self-reflection and thinking, it had been so long. I'd been on the go and touring and on the road so steady for the last like 7 years. This is the first time I had all this time sitting at home to myself to just think about things, in my relationships and who I am as a person, and do I love who I am as a person? Can I be better? How can I be better? So that coinciding with me writing a lot, I think resulted in the most authentic music I've ever written, and I'm really really proud of this record. I'm not allowed to say anything about when it's coming out, but it's coming. We did just put the new single out a couple weeks ago, and
Never giving up on you?
yes, yeah. And so, I'm really excited. I was a lot more hands-on. I worked with a new producer on some of the music as well, and I was way more hands-on the production side of things, which I think as a result again is more true to me and more authentic in terms of just the sound and the production, and just digging deeper into more layers of who I am as a person. And I mean, you're going to get the fun rowdy party songs that everybody loves from me, but you're going to get a whole lot more too. And so I've been saying, to a lot of people asking about the new music in the past, whenever I've been ready to put out a new project, it's always been this mixture of excitement and like crippling self-doubt and anxiety of like, I like this, but is everybody else gonna like it? And worrying about it, and then like second guessing myself and second guessing the songs and all this stuff. This is the first record I've ever made where I don't have any doubts. I don't have any second guessing. I look at it like this is the best record I could have made. This is who I am, and if somebody doesn't like this record, then I'm just not for them. So it doesn't matter. And that's okay because I'm not going to be for everybody. But I do feel confident in a way I never have before that this is the most me thing I've ever made, and this is my best offering. And so I'm just excited to get the new music out. We're starting to get some shows a little bit here and there in the US. So, while I kind of bide my time waiting to be able to get back at it in Canada, I'm going to keep building my fan base and do what I can here. Our whole plans for our US release really kind of we had a wrench thrown in those plans with the pandemic. We were supposed to do radio tour, and I had a lot of big US festivals and everything booked last year, and then all of a sudden everything was gone. So, it's tough to break as a new artist anytime, let alone during a pandemic when you can't physically tour and go out and make these relationships. So, we're just kind of regrouping and trying to figure out how to operate in this new normal and how best to keep the ball rolling. Work hard but work smart. So yeah, that's where we're at right now, just getting ready to put this new music out, and I'm trying to play as much as I can while I'm here.
Well, lovely catching up with you. Best of luck
Yeah,
with the new project. I'm excited to hear it, and congratulations on all your success so far.
thank you so much. Thanks for having me.